Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're going to talk about Norsca today because a new mod has finally dropped which is going to fix up a major problem with the faction, which is a lack of variety. What you can see on the screen right now is vanilla Total War Warhammer 3 and yeah, there's not a lot of units when it comes to humans. You have a lot of monsters, but it does feel a little bit empty, doesn't it? Especially as this was a race pack, well, a pre-order incentive, and it just feels like they've been kind of neglected. They're better now in campaign in terms of mechanics and so on, but a little bit more needs to be done. And this new mod, Expanded Roster Norsca by Decomposed, is going to give you a nice fleshed out feel for Norsca. You can already see that the roster itself is a lot bigger, focusing around humans. A lot of stuff is very lore friendly because it's taken from like Warhammer Fantasy roleplay and stuff, and it's going to make you feel like you have a fully fleshed out faction, especially more marauders. So let's just jump right in because there's a lot to talk about. So all the new units will be available in campaign as you can expect, and they'll be spread out mostly in the buildings that you can already expect marauders to be at. It's usually in the melee area. This is good because it means that you're going to be unlocking stuff fairly naturally. It's stuff that you're already going to be building as you progress for your campaign. Even the archers, the bondsmen are also available in the garrison building, so that means that you're going to be having access to everything. It works out quite well. I've been playing a campaign, and it just feels very fluid. It feels like everything is where it's supposed to be, you know? I know some people might say that it feels like there's too many units in one specific area, but I mean, if you look at the monster area too, it's just how it is in vanilla anyway. So yeah, I think this is done in a very good sense. You'll have access to a new hero variant known as the Jarl, again from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. This is a melee hero which has got a few different skills there just to be a bit better at, you know, buffing up some of your warriors and stuff, getting some extra experience. Right now there's no other Lord or Hero characters, there might be some in the future, but this works out quite well as you can also have them in the Warhorse and a War Mammoth. Curiously enough, no Chariot, not too sure why. But then again, War Mammoth, that's the main reason. This means that you can have more War Mammoths if you so want, or just have a character protecting your spellcasters, which isn't like a Skin Wolf or a Famir. Just in case you don't want to have a Skin Wolf or Famir, having the option is always great. This is basically what we've been seeing in vanilla too, which, yeah, it's a good thing. The hero character itself doesn't have a sword and shield, but instead uses a two-handed axe. When he's mounted on a horse, he uses a one-hander. I guess it's just the issue with weapon options on mounts, which can be quite problematic. I've tried to do this myself, so I completely understand this. But the real meat and potatoes is when you start going into the actual units. The first one being the Bondsman, which gives you some archers. It's kind of weird that Chaos, for some reason, just never uses archers when, for example, Norsca in lore, we know that they're perfectly capable of wielding a bow. It's nothing special. Keep in mind that, yeah, this is kind of like a low-tier archer, but, you know, decent range. They're expendable too. Not great accuracy, and they will suffer from poor leadership, but in general, just having some archers just to pepper your enemies a little bit does add a little bit of an extra oomph to your faction and does separate Norsca a little bit from the other Chaos factions, which is something that desperately needs to be done in future DLC anyway, as, you don't want them just to be Chaos Light, right? You want them to have a bit more identity, and it's a bit of a shame, because there's so much lore to Norsca anyway. Reavers are another unit, and they're actually pretty good, honestly. So they're anti-infantry, decent melee combat, they've got Stalk, they've got Frenzy, they've got a little bit of range, but they're fairly short range. The idea is these guys are just throwing as they go into damage, and then just ripping apart their enemies. Think of them as just stronger versions of berserkers, essentially, and I think that kind of fits out quite well. Having a little bit of variety, especially with these types of weapons. The berserkers in vanilla are decent, but having a little bit of extra stuff just works out a little bit more. My own personal campaign, I was playing a lot with Wolfric, and they do pair very nicely with his starting army, in all honesty. So yeah, it's a unit that I really do like using. Pit Fighters are a similar unit, but a little bit different because they don't have the range, they've got less armor. The idea is these are a whirlwind unit, so they're there to rip apart pretty much anything that you deal with. Anti-infantry once again, and damage dealer focused. And again, yeah, similar units, but fills a different role in the sense. You can go with a full army of berserkers if you so wish, and it kind of works out quite well. Stat-wise, they're pretty good, and I do see them being quite multi-purpose. You can use them frontline because, well, you know, they've got a lot of armor-piercing damage, base weapon damage, and so on, especially whilst they still have the whirlwind buff. You can use them to flank too, and they'll be just as devastating, if not more, so yeah, pretty good unit all around. Shield Maidens are a frontline unit. This is one of your hammers, and they've actually got a decent buff, which will give them shield wall, you know, so extra physical resistance and extra missile resistance. It's always good to have a tanky unit. Yeah, sure, it's not the best stats, but they're able to hold the line quite well, and I think that's actually quite important. Very high leadership too, so they're able to stay there and take a decent amount of punishment. Plus, it's going into the fantasy of, obviously, you know, Norscan women are quite hardy and quite strong, so it makes sense for them to fight alongside the men too, because, well, if you live in Norsca, you need to know how to actually fight or else you're screwed. Alright, Huskals. I really like the concept here. So Huskals themselves are a higher tier unit, decently armored, very similar to that of Chaos Warriors with sword and board, and what's really good about them is they've got Guardian too, so they're there to protect your spellcasters, your Jarls, hell, even your chieftains, but also being able to do a decent amount of damage too. So yeah, it's a frontline unit, but it's multi-purpose, and I quite like this. I like the concept, I think they look cool too, and it's something that I actually expect that we could get in vanilla in the future in the form of a DLC. Frost Hydra is a new monster for you, which, you know, we're all used to Hydras because Dark Elves and so on, but yeah, I think it's actually quite cool. Plus, I love the look of it. I think the coloring is really, really nice. It's something that I might paint one of my own Hydras in that style too. But yeah, not too much to talk about because we're used to them, but Frost Breath is a magic missile, they've got regeneration, they've got frost attacks too, which makes it a little bit different, and Terror. It's just nice to have a different monster just to add to your already growing list of loads of monsters. The Valkyrie is a single entity unit, which, you know, just adds in a little bit more. It's something that a lot of people, even in fan codexes and stuff, they generally add in a Valkyrie. So armor piercing, flying, anti-large, vanguard deployment. This is something that you can use to take out some big monsters. And, well, if you're going to be hunting down big monsters, it does make sense. It uses the rigging and stuff of Valkyria. I think it looks kind of nice. It's just cool to have something like this, especially when you're going to be dealing with a lot of dragons or flying creatures like Bloodthirsters. Having something to be able to fight back, it's not going to be able to do that much. It's still, like, fairly weak compared to a Bloodthirster. It'll fly around very quickly and will be able to do its job as long as you use it well. And finally, there is a regiment of renown known as Mortkin's Fang. This is a Norscan Ice Wolf, but a single entity. You know, it's armor-piercing, anti-large, very fast. It can move around very quickly. It's got frostbite. A lot of stuff that you can already expect. It's a nice throwback to Lord Mortkin, which is a really interesting character in lore. We're actually going to be talking about him in a future video soon, so yeah, this kind of fits in quite well. Good for taking out some big monsters if you need it to, and also good for just, like, keeping some artillery busy, which is what I've been using it for, because, well, you know, when you're dealing with, like, say, for example, Bretonnia, which you're going to be fighting a lot of Bretonnia, there's not a lot of monsters to deal with. But yeah, so this is another thing which I know a lot of modders, when they do unit packs, they naturally put it in and they forget about it. But yeah, you can see here with the skills on the red skill line for your legendary lord and your generic lords too, which skills will upgrade the units to make them a little stronger. So yes, they do actually get upgraded as you play for your campaign. They will be viable in later game and so on, which is important, obviously, because you want these units to actually last a decent amount of time. So we got a little bit of a battle here, randomly generated Norscan army for me, which was actually a decently healthy mix, and a randomly generated Bretonnia army, because, well, you know, Norsca versus Bretonnia is quite a decent matchup, and I want to talk about my experience using the mod, because this is definitely something which made Norsca a lot more bearable. Yes, the update that Creative Assembly did provide in the Immortal Empires launch did make Norsca a lot better. They did get nerfed afterwards, but it kind of made sense because their economy was through the roof. But a big issue that I always had with Norsca was the fact that, they were missing out on a bunch of unit variants. You know, it's just some extra humans to make Norsca feel a little bit more fleshed out. And this does really, really well, taking inspiration from a lot of stuff like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It was honestly pretty good. This mod's been out for like 2-3 days at this point, and I was playing for a few hours each day, and yeah, I was honestly quite impressed. Everything felt like it was a vanilla unit, which is the good thing. When a mod feels quite vanilla-ish, it makes the game feel better. Not only that, but I was playing as a different faction, as a different race too at a certain point, and it was cool seeing the modded units in the Norscan factions just naturally reoccurring. You'll notice that when you play as Wolfric or Frog or even a modded Lord and stuff, but like, it's just cool to see the AI make use of the modded units, as you'll start to see some more variety when you're fighting them too. A big thing when it comes to mods for me is, will I be using these mods constantly? Not only when I'm playing as these factions, but also when I'm playing as other factions. Will it just make sense to see that happening through other factions, through other gameplay, through other campaigns? But yeah, this is definitely a mod that you're going to want to try out if you want Norsca to feel a bit more fleshed out, and if you just want to have a little bit of fun with Norsca. It will be linked in the description below. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below too. We'll have a little bit of a discussion, see what you guys think about this. Decomposed is one of my favorite modders, so this works out really, really well. It's nice to see Norsca get a little bit of love, and with all that being said, I will see you all again very, very soon. I'll let the rest of the battle play out so you can see how this army does, considering that I don't have any magic and I'm dealing against the Law of Life wizard, so I should be in a negative, but I do fairly well.
Chaos Marauders! For chaos! Runner horsemen! Down! Marauder chieftain! Chaos Marauders! Runner horsemen! Chaos Marauders! The shield of Britonia! Runner horsemen, do not scatter! Chaos Marauders! Now is our time! Save us from dark powers! Chaos Marauders! The Dark Gods command me! Chaos Marauders! We want their eyes! Leader of savages! Northmen live! Fade them to the lady's mercy! Get them!